The apartment was small, so small that when it rained, you could hear every single drop hitting the roof like tiny drums. The walls were thin, the paint was peeling, and the heating never worked properly in winter. But for an 11-year-old boy living with his grandmother, this was home. It was all he had ever known. His grandmother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. She cleaned offices in the morning and washed dishes at a restaurant at night. Most days, the boy came home from school to an empty apartment. He would do his homework alone, eat whatever his grandmother had left for him in the fridge, and wait by the window until he saw her walking slowly down the street. Tired, but always smiling when she saw his face pressed against the glass. They did not have much, but they had each other. And for a long time, that felt like enough. The boy was quiet at school. He was not the type to raise his hand in class or make a lot of friends. Some kids called him shy. Others just ignored him completely. He wore the same 3 shirts on rotation, and his shoes had holes that he tried to hide by keeping his feet under his desk. He learned early that being invisible was easier than being noticed. When you are noticed, people ask questions. And when people ask questions, you have to explain why your clothes are old, why you never bring lunch money, why your father is gone and your mother left when you were just a baby. So he stayed quiet. He kept his head down. And every single day after school, he took the long way home. There was a reason for that. About 4 blocks from his apartment, there was a community center. It was an old brick building with big windows and a faded sign out front. Most kids in the neighborhood went there for basketball or homework help. But the boy was not interested in any of that. What pulled him to that building every single day was something else entirely. Music. Every afternoon, around 4 o'clock, piano lessons took place in the main hall. And if you stood outside, near the side window, you could hear everything. The scales, the practice songs, the beautiful, flowing melodies that sometimes made the boy close his eyes and forget where he was. He did not know why the music affected him so deeply. He just knew that when he heard those notes floating through the air, something inside him came alive. It was like his heart was speaking a language he had never learned but somehow understood perfectly. The sadness, the joy, the hope, the pain, it was all there in those keys. And standing outside that window, the boy felt like he was not alone anymore. For months, he did this. Every single day. Rain or shine. He would stand there. Sometimes for an hour. Just listening. His grandmother once asked him why he always came home late. He told her he liked walking slow. She gave him a look like she knew there was more to it, but she did not push. That was the thing about his grandmother. She always knew when to let him keep his secrets. One cold afternoon in October, something changed. The boy was standing in his usual spot when the side door suddenly opened. A woman stepped out, holding a cup of coffee. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore glasses that sat low on her nose. She looked important. Serious, like someone who did not have time for nonsense. She spotted him immediately. "You," she said, narrowing her eyes. "I have seen you out here before, many times." The boy felt his face go hot. His first instinct was to run. But his feet stayed frozen to the ground. "Well," she continued, "are you going to tell me why you keep standing outside my window like a little ghost?" The boy swallowed hard. His voice came out small. "I like the music." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she let out a short breath and looked him up and down. He saw her eyes move to his worn jacket, his old shoes, his backpack with the broken zipper held together by a safety pin. He had seen that look before. It was the look people gave when they were deciding what kind of kid he was based on what he wore. Finally, she spoke again. "Do you play?" "No, ma'am." "Do you want to learn?" His heart jumped. For a second, he could not believe what he was hearing. Was this really happening? Was she offering to teach him? He thought about sitting at one of those beautiful pianos, thought about his fingers pressing the keys, thought about making that sound himself. "Yes," he whispered. "More than anything." The woman sighed. She took a long sip of her coffee. "Lessons cost money, $40 an hour. And this program is funded for students who have shown potential." Students who have been recommended. Students with backgrounds in music. The boy felt the hope drain out of him like water through a hole. "I do not think this is the right fit for you," she said. Her voice was not mean exactly, but it was final, like a door closing. "Perhaps you can find something else at the center. They have sports programs, art classes, things that might be more suited to your situation." She turned and walked back inside without another word. The boy stood there for a long time. He did not cry. He had trained himself not to cry a long time ago. But something inside him cracked that day. Something that had been holding on to hope for so long finally let go. He walked home slowly. When his grandmother asked how his day was, he just shrugged and said it was fine. He did his homework. He ate dinner. He went to bed early, but he could not sleep. He lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, hearing those piano notes in his head. And the more he thought about it, the more one question kept spinning around in his mind. Why? Why did it matter where he came from? Why did it matter what he wore, or how much money he had? Music was just sound. Beautiful sound. And sound did not care if you were rich or poor. Sound did not care if your shoes had holes or your jacket was 2 sizes too small. So why did she? The boy did not have an answer. But lying there in the dark, he made a decision. A quiet decision. One he did not tell anyone. Not his grandmother. Not his teachers. No one. He was going to learn to play the piano. He did not know how. He did not know when. But he knew one thing for certain. That woman had looked at him and seen nothing. She had looked at his clothes and his background and decided he was not worth her time. One day, he was going to prove her wrong. One day, he was going to sit at that piano and play something so beautiful that no one would ever look at him like that again. He did not know it yet. But that cold October night was the beginning of everything. The beginning of a journey that would take him through pain and doubt, and moments where he wanted to give up completely. But also the beginning of something magical. Because sometimes, the kids who have nothing are the ones who end up with everything to give. And this boy had a melody inside him that the world had never heard. Not yet, but soon, a week after the woman turned him away, the boy found himself back at the community center. He told himself he was just walking by, just passing through. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. The music kept pulling him back like a magnet. This time, he did not stand outside the window. Instead, he walked through the front door. The main hall was busy. Kids were shooting basketballs on the court. Others sat at tables doing homework. No one paid attention to the quiet boy slipping through the crowd. That was the thing about being invisible. Sometimes, it worked in your favor. He wandered down a hallway he had never explored before. Past the bathrooms, past a small office with the door closed, and then, at the very end of the hall, he found it. A storage room. The door was cracked open just a little. He peeked inside and felt his heart stop. There, sitting against the far wall under a pile of old sports equipment, was a keyboard. It was dusty. One of the legs on the stand was bent. A few of the keys looked slightly yellow with age. But to the boy, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He looked around. No one was watching. No one even knew he was here. He slipped inside and closed the door behind him. The room smelled like old rubber and dust. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, but he did not turn it on. He did not want to risk anyone seeing the light under the door. Instead, he sat down on an old folding chair and placed his fingers on the keys. They were cold. Silent. The keyboard was not plugged in, but it did not matter. He pressed down on the keys anyway. No sound came out. But in his head, he could hear everything. He played the notes he had memorized from standing outside that window for so many months. His fingers moved slowly at first, then faster. He made mistakes. He hit wrong keys. But he kept going. For the first time in his life, he was playing the piano, sort of. He came back the next day. And the day after that. Every afternoon, while other kids played basketball or did their homework, the boy snuck into the storage room and practiced on that silent keyboard. He would stay for an hour, sometimes two, until he heard the center getting quiet and knew it was time to leave. No one noticed. No one cared. And that was exactly how he wanted it. But about 3 weeks into his secret routine, something happened. He was sitting in the storage room, eyes closed, fingers moving across the keys, completely lost in the music inside his head. He did not hear the door open. He did not hear the footsteps. He did not notice anything until a voice suddenly cut through the silence. "What in the world are you doing in here?" The boy's eyes flew open. His heart nearly exploded out of his chest. Standing in the doorway was an older man holding a mop and a bucket. He had gray hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, and wore a faded blue jumpsuit. The janitor. The boy had seen him around before, sweeping floors and emptying trash cans, but they had never spoken. The boy jumped to his feet. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't tell anyone." The words tumbled out fast and messy. He was already imagining the trouble he was in. They would ban him from the center. They would call his grandmother. She would be so disappointed. But the janitor did not yell. He did not even look angry. Instead, he just stood there, staring at the boy with a curious expression. Then, his eyes moved to the keyboard, to the boy's hands, back to his face. "You were playing?" he asked. "It's not plugged in," the boy said quickly. "I wasn't making any noise. I was just practicing. I know I shouldn't be in here. I'll leave. I'll never come back. I promise." The janitor held up a hand. "Slow down, son. Take a breath." The boy forced himself to stop talking. His chest was rising and falling fast. He watched the old man walk slowly across the room, stepping over a pile of old basketball nets, until he reached the wall behind the keyboard. There was an outlet there. The boy had seen it before. He had thought about plugging in the keyboard 100 times, but he had always been too scared, too worried someone would hear. The janitor bent down with a small grunt, grabbed the power cord from the floor, and plugged it in. The keyboard hummed to life. A small green light appeared above the keys. The janitor straightened up, looked at the boy, and nodded toward the chair. "Well," he said, "let's hear it." The boy blinked. You want me to play?" Did I stutter? For a moment, the boy could not move. His brain was trying to catch up with what was happening. This man, this stranger, was not kicking him out. He was not calling anyone. He was asking him to play. Slowly, the boy sat back down. His hands were shaking as he placed them on the keys. He took a deep breath, and then he played. It was rough, really rough. He hit wrong notes. His timing was off. He forgot parts and had to start over. But he kept going. He played a simple melody he had taught himself from memory. It was nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone at a recital, but it was his. He had learned it by himself, in the dark, on a keyboard that did not even make a sound. When he finished, he looked up at the janitor. The old man was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. His face was hard to read. For a terrible second, the boy thought he was going to laugh, just like everyone else. But then the janitor smiled. "Not bad," he said. "Not bad at all." The boy felt something warm spread through his chest. Those 2 words meant more to him than the man would ever know. From that night on, everything changed. The janitor never said much. He would come by the storage room around closing time, plug in the keyboard, and sit in the corner while the boy practiced. Sometimes he read a newspaper. Sometimes he just closed his eyes and listened. But he always stayed, and somehow, his quiet presence made the boy feel safe. They had a system now. The boy would sneak in after school, practice on the silent keys so no one would hear. Then, when the center emptied out, and only the janitor was left, the keyboard would come alive. Weeks turned into months. The boy got better. Much better. He started figuring out more complex songs. He learned to play with both hands at the same time. He stopped needing to look at the keys. His grandmother noticed something was different. At dinner, she would catch him tapping his fingers on the table like he was playing invisible notes. He would hum melodies under his breath while washing dishes. Once, she asked him what song he was humming, and he could not explain it because it was something he had made up himself. She gave him that look again, the one that said she knew something was going on. But she still did not push. She just smiled softly and let him keep his secret a little longer. But not everyone was as kind. One evening, the boy lost track of time. He was practicing a new piece, a faster one that required quick fingers, and he did not hear the storage room door open. 3 kids from the center's official music program stood in the doorway. They were older than him, better dressed. One of them held a violin case. Another had a folder full of sheet music tucked under his arm. They stared at him like he was a joke. "Wait," one of them said, a grin spreading across his face. "Is this where you've been hiding?" The boy froze. "You actually think you're learning to play?" Another one laughed. "In a storage closet? On that piece of junk?" They all started laughing, loud and mean. "There's no way he can play," the first one said. "He's never even had a lesson. Look at him. He probably doesn't even know how to read music." The boy's face burned. His hands curled into fists at his sides. They were right. He could not read sheet music. He did not know the proper techniques. He had never had a real teacher. But they were also wrong, because he could play. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not like them, but he could play. And one day, he would prove it. The laughter from those kids echoed in the boy's head for days. Every time he sat down at the keyboard, he could hear their voices. Every time he hit a wrong note, he could see their smirking faces. It made him angry. It made him sad. But most of all, it made him practice harder. He started staying later at the community center. The janitor never complained. In fact, the old man seemed to understand, without the boy ever saying a word. Some nights, he would bring 2 cups of hot chocolate from the vending machine and set one down next to the keyboard without a sound. They would sit together in that dusty storage room, the boy playing and the janitor listening. And somehow that was enough. Winter came fast that year. The streets turned gray and icy. The boy's jacket was too thin, and his grandmother worried about him walking home in the cold. But he kept coming to the center every single day. Nothing was going to stop him now. Then one afternoon in early December, everything changed. The boy walked into the community center and immediately noticed something different. There was a crowd gathered near the main bulletin board. Kids and parents were huddled together, talking excitedly, pointing at a large poster that had been pinned up that morning. He pushed his way through until he could see it. The poster was bright blue with gold letters. At the top, it read, "Citywide Young Musicians Showcase." Below that were the details. A competition for young musicians from all across the city, all instruments welcome, open to anyone under the age of 16. The grand prize was a full scholarship to the city's most prestigious music academy. There would also be talent scouts in the audience. Record producers, people who could change a young person's life forever. The boy's heart started pounding. He read the poster 3 more times just to make sure he understood. Anyone could enter. Anyone. You did not have to be part of a fancy program. You did not have to come from a rich family. You just had to show up and play. For the first time in months, he felt something that scared him. Hope. He spent the next 2 days thinking about it. Could he really do this? Could he really walk onto a stage in front of hundreds of people and play? He had never performed for anyone, except the janitor. He had never even played on a real piano, just that old keyboard in the storage room. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something important. This was his chance. Maybe his only chance. If he did not take it, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what could have been. On the 3rd day, he made his decision. He was going to enter the competition. But first, he needed to do something that terrified him even more than performing on stage. He needed to talk to the woman who had turned him away. She was in the main hall when he found her, sitting at the grand piano and marking notes on a sheet of paper. The same woman with the gray hair and the glasses. The same woman who had looked at his old shoes and decided he was not worth her time. His hands were shaking as he walked toward her. His mouth felt dry. Every part of him wanted to turn around and run. But he kept walking, She looked up when she heard his footsteps. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her eyes narrowed with recognition. "You," she said. "The boy from outside the window." He nodded. He could not find his voice. "What do you want?" she asked. Not mean, but not friendly either. Just tired. Like she had already decided this conversation was a waste of her time. The boy took a deep breath. And then, instead of speaking, he did something he had never done before. He sat down on the piano bench next to her. She looked startled. "Excuse me? What do you think you're—" But before she could finish, his fingers touched the keys, and he began to play. It was a piece he had been working on for weeks. Something he had created himself. It started soft and slow, like a whisper. Then it built, layer by layer, note by note, until it filled the entire hall. He poured everything into it. All the loneliness, all the rejection, all the nights in that storage room when he thought about giving up but didn't. All the hope he had been too scared to feel. He played like no one was watching. He played like his life depended on it. When the last note faded, the hall was completely silent. The boy sat frozen, his hands still resting on the keys. He was too scared to look up, too scared to see her reaction. What if she laughed? What if she told him it was terrible? What if she called security and had him thrown out? But then he heard something he did not expect. A long, slow exhale. He looked up. The woman was staring at him. Her expression had changed completely. The tiredness was gone. The dismissiveness was gone. In its place was something he could not quite name. Surprise. Maybe. Or shock. Or something deeper than both. "Where did you learn that?" she asked quietly. "I taught myself," he said. "In the storage room. On the old keyboard." She blinked. "You taught yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." She was silent for a long moment. Then she took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes like she was trying to process what had just happened. "The showcase," she finally said. "That's why you're here. You want to compete." He nodded. She put her glasses back on and looked at him hard. "Do you have any idea what you're walking into? The students in that competition have been training for years. They come from the best music schools in the city. They have coaches, private tutors, parents who spend thousands of dollars on their education. You have been playing on a broken keyboard in a storage closet." The boy felt his stomach drop. She was going to say no. She was going to turn him away again. But then she said something that changed everything. "The competition is in 3 weeks. If you are serious about this, truly serious, I will train you myself. No charge. But I need you to understand something." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "This will be the hardest thing you have ever done. I will push you until you want to quit. I will demand more from you than anyone has ever demanded. And even then, even if you give me everything you have, there is a very real chance you will not win. The odds are against you. They have always been against you." She paused. "So I need to know right now. Are you willing to go through all of that? Are you willing to work harder than you have ever worked in your life, knowing you might still fail?" The boy thought about his grandmother, coming home exhausted every night, but still finding the strength to smile. He thought about the janitor, plugging in that keyboard without asking for anything in return. He thought about all the people who had looked at him and seen nothing. Then he thought about the music inside him, the melody that had been building for so long, waiting for a chance to be heard. He looked the woman straight in the eyes. "I have been failing my whole life," he said. "But I never stopped trying. I'm not going to stop now." For the first time since he had met her, the woman smiled. It was small, just a slight curve at the corner of her lips. But it was real. "Then we start tomorrow," she said. 5 o'clock. Don't be late." The boy walked out of the community center that afternoon feeling like his feet were barely touching the ground. The cold wind hit his face, but he didn't feel it. The sun was already setting, painting the sky orange and pink. And for once, the world didn't feel so heavy. He had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to learn everything he didn't know. 3 weeks to become something no one believed he could be. It was impossible. But then again, so was teaching yourself piano in a storage closet, and he had already done that. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of the boy's life. The woman had not been exaggerating. She pushed him harder than anyone ever had. Every single day after school, he went straight to the community center. No breaks, no excuses. 5 o'clock sharp, just like she said, and every single day, she found something wrong with his playing. Your posture is terrible. Sit up straight. Your wrists are too stiff. Loosen them. You're rushing. Slow down. Feel the music. Don't chase it. Again. 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 Some days, he played the same piece 20 times in a row, 30 times, until his fingers ached, and his back hurt, and his eyes burned from staring at the keys. He had thought teaching himself in the storage room was hard. That was nothing compared to this. The problem was not talent. The woman admitted that much early on. He had a gift. A natural ear for music. An ability to feel things that most students took years to develop. But gifts only got you so far. The rest was technique, discipline, control, and those were things he had never learned. Playing by ear was one thing. Playing correctly was something else entirely. She taught him how to read sheet music. It was like learning a new language, notes and symbols and lines that made no sense at first. He stayed up late every night, studying the papers she gave him, trying to memorize what each marking meant. His grandmother found him asleep at the kitchen table more than once, his head resting on a pile of music sheets. She taught him proper hand positioning. For years, he had been pressing the keys all wrong. His fingers were too flat. His thumbs tucked in too far. Fixing those habits felt impossible. Every time he tried to play the right way, his hands wanted to go back to the old way. It was like fighting against his own body. She taught him dynamics. Soft and loud. Fast and slow. When to hold back, and when to let go. Music was not just about hitting the right notes. It was about telling a story, and telling a story meant knowing when to whisper and when to shout. By the end of the first week, the boy was exhausted. By the end of the second week, he was breaking. His grades started slipping at school. He could barely keep his eyes open in class. His teachers noticed. His classmates noticed. But he did not care. The only thing that mattered was the showcase. The only thing that mattered was proving that he belonged. But the doubt was creeping in. One evening, about a week before the competition, the boy was practicing alone in the main hall. The woman had stepped out to take a phone call, leaving him to run through his piece one more time. He was tired. His fingers felt heavy. He kept making mistakes he had already fixed days ago. That was when they walked in. 3 students from the city's top music academy. The boy recognized them immediately. They were the same kids who had laughed at him in the storage room all those weeks ago, and leading them was the tallest one. The one with the expensive clothes, and the perfect hair, and the look on his face like the whole world owed him something. They stopped near the door and watched him play. He tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the music, but he could feel their eyes on him. He could hear their whispers. When he finished, there was silence for a moment. Then the tall one started clapping. Slow. Mocking. Not bad, he said, walking closer. For someone who learned piano in a janitor's closet. The others laughed. The boy's jaw tightened. He did not say anything. You know you're wasting your time, right? The tall one continued. He was standing right next to the piano now, looking down at the boy like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. The showcase isn't some neighborhood talent show. Real musicians are going to be there. People who actually know what they're doing. I know what I'm doing, the boy said quietly. The tall one smirked. Do you? Can you even read sheet music? Do you know what a crescendo is? A fermata? Have you ever played in front of more than 5 people? The boy did not answer. His face was burning. That's what I thought. The tall one leaned in closer. Here's some advice. Save yourself the embarrassment. Drop out now. Go back to your little storage room and keep pretending. Because when you get on that stage, Everyone is going to see exactly what you are. He paused, letting the words sink in. Nothing. Then he turned and walked out, his friends following behind him, their laughter echoing down the hallway. The boy sat at the piano for a long time after they left. His hands were trembling. Not from the cold, not from exhaustion, from something deeper, something that had been building inside him for weeks. What if they were right? What if he really was just pretending? What if all this hard work was pointless? The woman had warned him. The odds were against him. He was competing against kids who had everything he didn't. Training, resources, support, confidence. What did he have? A few months of practice on a broken keyboard. A teacher who took pity on him. And a dream that suddenly felt ridiculous. He went home that night and told his grandmother he was done. She was sitting at the kitchen table, soaking her feet in a bucket of warm water after another long shift. She looked up when he walked in and immediately knew something was wrong. She always knew. "Sit down," she said softly. He sat across from her, staring at the table, unable to meet her eyes. "Tell me what happened." So he told her. Everything. The kids who mocked him. The tall one's words. The fear that had been eating at him for days. The feeling that he was fooling himself. That he didn't belong. That no matter how hard he tried, he would never be good enough. When he finished, his grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hands in hers. Her fingers were rough and worn from years of hard work. But her grip was warm. Steady. "Let me tell you something," she said. "When your mother left, I didn't know how I was going to raise you. I was too old, too tired, too poor. Everyone said it was impossible. Said I should give you up, let someone younger take care of you." The boy looked up. She had never talked about this before. "But I didn't listen to them," she continued. "Because I looked at you, this tiny baby with big brown eyes, and I saw something. I saw fight. I saw strength. I saw a boy who was going to do great things, no matter what the world threw at him." Her eyes were glistening now. "Those kids at the center? They don't know you. They see your clothes. They see where you come from. But they don't see what's inside you. They don't see what I see." She squeezed his hands tighter. "Baby, that piano doesn't care where you come from. Those keys don't know if you're rich or poor. They only know what you give them." She paused. "So the question is, what are you going to give?" The boy felt something shift inside him. The doubt was still there. The fear was still there. But underneath it, something else was rising. Something stronger. He thought about all those nights in the storage room. All those hours of practice. All the times he wanted to quit but didn't. He had come too far to stop now. He had worked too hard to let some kid in expensive clothes take this away from him. His grandmother smiled, like she could see the change happening in real time. "That's my boy," she whispered. He didn't sleep much that night. But when the sun came up, he was already dressed and ready. He had 1 week left. 1 week to prove that he was more than nothing. 1 week to show the world what he was made of. And he was not going to waste a single second. The day of the showcase arrived faster than the boy expected. He woke up before the sun. His stomach was in knots. He had barely slept, running through the piece in his head over and over again. His fingers twitching against the blanket like they were pressing invisible keys. His grandmother was already awake when he came out of his room. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. And next to her was something the boy had never seen before. A jacket. It was dark blue, almost black, with small silver buttons down the front. Simple but elegant. The kind of jacket rich kids wore to fancy events. The kind of jacket the boy had only ever seen in store windows. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandmother smiled. "I made it." He looked closer. The stitching was careful but not perfect. Some of the seams were slightly uneven. She had sewn this by hand. Every single stitch. "I've been working on it for 3 weeks, she said. "Stayed up a few extra hours after my shifts. Wanted you to have something nice for today." The boy's eyes burned. He didn't know what to say. He just walked over and hugged her tighter than he had ever hugged anyone in his life. "You're going to do great," she whispered into his ear. "I believe in you. I always have." The showcase was held at the city's largest concert hall. The boy had walked past the building 100 times, but had never been inside. When he stepped through the front doors that afternoon, he felt like he had entered another world. The ceiling stretched up so high he could barely see where it ended. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls of light. The floors were polished marble that reflected everything like a mirror. And everywhere he looked, there were people, hundreds of them, parents in expensive suits, kids carrying instrument cases, judges with clipboards and serious expressions. The boy's heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He found a seat near the back of the auditorium and waited. His grandmother sat next to him, holding his hand. A few rows ahead, he spotted the janitor from the community center. The old man caught his eye and gave him a small nod. That simple gesture meant more than words ever could. The competition began. One by one, young musicians took the stage. Violinists, cellists, flute players, pianists. Each one was polished and precise. Each one played like they had been training their whole lives, because they had. Then the tall boy from the music academy walked out. He sat at the grand piano with complete confidence. No nerves, no hesitation. He adjusted the microphone, smiled at the audience, and began to play. It was flawless. Every note was perfect. Every movement was controlled. The piece was complicated and impressive, full of fast runs and dramatic crescendos. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. The judges were nodding and writing things down. His parents in the front row were beaming with pride. The boy in the back row felt his stomach sink. How was he supposed to compete with that? He didn't have years of training. He didn't have famous teachers or expensive lessons. He had a storage closet and a broken keyboard, and 3 weeks of cramming everything he didn't know into his exhausted brain. Maybe the tall boy was right. Maybe he was just fooling himself. Then he felt his grandmother squeeze his hand. "Don't watch them," she said quietly. "This isn't about them. This is about you. This is about your story. Nobody else can tell it." He took a deep breath, and then another, and then another. A few minutes later, they called his name. The walk to the stage felt like it took forever. His legs were shaking, his hands were sweating. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him as he crossed the polished floor and climbed the steps to the spotlight. The grand piano sat in the center of the stage, gleaming under the lights. It was the most beautiful instrument he had ever seen. He had practiced on it a few times during the past week, but it still took his breath away. He sat down on the bench. The seat was cold. The audience was silent. He looked out at the crowd. So many faces. So many strangers. He couldn't see his grandmother from here. Couldn't see the janitor. Couldn't see anyone he knew. He was completely alone. His hands hovered over the keys. For one terrible moment, his mind went blank. He couldn't remember the first note. Couldn't remember anything. The fear was swallowing him whole. But then he closed his eyes, and he thought about the storage room. The dusty air. The bent stand. The silent keys under his fingers. He thought about the janitor plugging in the keyboard without saying a word. He thought about his grandmother staying up late, sewing that jacket stitch by stitch. He thought about all the nights he had wanted to give up but didn't. He thought about the music inside him, the melody that had been waiting so long to be heard. And then he began to play. It started soft. A single note hanging in the air like a question. Then another. Then another. The melody unfolded slowly, gently, like a flower opening at dawn. It was the piece he had written himself, born in that storage closet, shaped by every struggle and every tear and every moment of doubt. The music told his story. The loneliness of being invisible. The ache of being told he wasn't good enough. The quiet hope that refused to die, no matter how many times the world tried to crush it. And then, as the piece built toward its climax, something else emerged. Strength. Defiance. Joy. His fingers danced across the keys. He didn't think about technique. He didn't think about the judges, or the other competitors, or the tall boy who had called him nothing. He just played. He poured everything he had into that piano, every ounce of his soul, every beat of his heart. When the final note faded into silence, he kept his eyes closed. He was afraid to open them, afraid of what he might see. The auditorium was completely still. 1 second passed, then 2, then 3, and then he heard it. A single person clapping. He opened his eyes. His grandmother was standing in her seat, tears streaming down her face, her hands coming together over and over again. Then the janitor stood. Then someone else. And someone else. And someone else. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The applause was deafening. It rolled over him like a wave, warm and overwhelming. People were cheering. Some were crying. Even some of the judges were standing. The boy sat frozen at the piano, unable to move, unable to breathe. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening, but it was. He didn't win first place that night. That went to a girl who played the violin like an angel, and she deserved every bit of it. But when the judges announced the special scholarship award, given to the student who showed the most extraordinary potential, they called his name. He walked to the stage in a daze. Someone handed him a certificate and shook his hand. Cameras flashed, people clapped, but all he could see was his grandmother in the crowd, sobbing and laughing at the same time. After the ceremony, the woman who had trained him found him backstage. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying too. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "That day, outside the window, I looked at you and saw what you didn't have. I should have seen what you did have." She paused. "I've never been so happy to be wrong in my entire life." The boy smiled. "I just needed someone to believe in me." She shook her head. "No. You believed in yourself. That's the part no one can teach." Later that night, the boy walked home with his grandmother. The streets were quiet. The stars were out. He was still wearing the jacket she had made, the scholarship certificate tucked carefully under his arm. "So," she said, looking over at him with a tired but proud smile, "what are you going to play next?" He laughed. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel so scary. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I've got a lot of melodies left in me." And he did. This was only the beginning.